What is the role you see for CIDSE and the Catholic Church in the matters of development?
I think it's quite an important role because the way the world is looking at the moment, people are looking for solutions to a number of fairly intractable problems. We have a global recession, which is hitting the poorest the hardest. We have ongoing climate change and environmental degradation. We have an increasing scarcity of some key resources like food and water and energy. We have geopolitical change, whether that's in the Arab countries, whether that's the moving of economic power eastwards towards China and India. And in this situation, we're living in a world where I think new solutions are called for. We can't any longer think about a world where there's this focus on just economic growth being the only mark of development. We have to think about the human person and why the total development of a human person is important, which is about relationships, which is about family, as well as basic needs of food and water and shelter. And we also have to live in a world where we have to be more sufficient. We have to share more, because we're all on one planet. 7 billion people living on one planet, of which 1 billion are in absolute poverty and 1 billion are in relative wealth. So that calls for new thinking. And I think that a Catholic voice can help that new thinking by putting the person at the centre of development, and by thinking about God's creation and trying to preserve God's creation, not just for our generation, but for generations to come.
In these times of crisis, and most European countries are in crisis, talking about developing countries and attributing money to developing countries is still an important thing to do?
I think it's even more important. I think that one of the issues that Europe has been facing in the past 20 years has been a rapid growth in incomes, in wealth, in business. And to be honest, it's been an unsustainable growth. And we're only now realizing that it's unsustainable growth. At the same time, we're living in the most unequal world we've ever had, between the richest and the poorest. And I think we've got to start thinking about a development process which makes sure that 1 billion people are not in absolute poverty and 800 million people don't go to bed hungry every day. At the same time, in Europe, we throw half our food away. We consume resources as if, we consume 10 times more resources than the average Kenyan. So in this situation, it's even more important to think about one world and about making sure that we can share the resources. And the amount of aid that's given by Portugal, by Europe, by Britain is very small. So yes, we should still be thinking about the poorest of the world, while we're also trying to get ourselves out of our own economic mess.
Do you feel that the common people share that same feeling?
I think some do, and I think they share it more when you explain it. I think we're in a society where we want sound bites. We're in a society where it's easy to blame. And I think if you sit down with somebody over a glass of wine or a glass of beer or a nice meal and you explain these issues, they understand. It just takes us, our responsibility is to get the message across better than we do.
Do you feel that the problems that we live today in the developed countries are a reflex of the world's inequalities?
To some extent they are. That you could argue that the result of the European problems or the North American problems or even the developed world's problems come back to a focus on economic wealth. They come back to a focus on greed. They come back to a focus that people believe they can get something for nothing. That's been the sort of the way we've developed our economic growth in Europe and North America over the past 20 years. You can't do that. And so I think in some ways all the problems of the world can be narrowed down to the wrong way of looking about what it means to develop, what it means to be a human person, and move away from greed, move more into working for the common good of all. And I also think that doing that makes us happier. We could live on 60% of what we're currently living on. We don't have to buy the new iPhone every time one comes out. We can keep it for another year. We just need to have a different attitude.
Do you feel that the work that you do in developing countries can learn from the mistakes that we did in the developed countries and use it to benefit the developing countries in their process of growth?
I think so. Anyone that's worked in a developing country knows a number of things. Knows that even when people are living in relative poverty and they can't afford the best houses, the best transport, and their food is very basic, they're still many times quite happy. And one of the reasons is because they have relationships. Things are more important than wealth and money. Your family is more important, your friendships are more important, the space to sit down and talk to people and treat people humanely is more important. And so I think we can learn from that sense that you don't need to be mega wealthy in order to be happy. You can actually be sufficient, and actually you're probably going to be happier.